seconds because I think some people say that they have to reload Rumble when they get in here. So maybe 20 seconds here, and I'll throw up our favorite banner. I love that you've branded it Gilligan's Island.
Feels more like the Hotel California these days.
See if I can license that sound for it.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy. Yes, that's me speaking to you from the bottom of a tin can, laid low yesterday by a chest cold. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I'm not stronger yet, but I'm not dead yet. So we had non-jury proceedings in the Gilligan's Island case, USA versus Joe Biggs et al. Yesterday, involving the admissibility of certain exhibits that will show, in the government's view, that third parties were tools of the Proud Boys on the morning of January 6th and into the afternoon. I'm not sure I understand what the tools theory means. I've never seen anything like it in a courtroom before. Should there be a conviction in appellate court, we'll have plenty to gnaw on. But the jury does come back today, and can't even do my little toot here. It looks as though the government's case is coming to an end. In the course of discussing things with the government and the judge, it appears as though the government may have only 3 more witnesses. One, an FBI agent today who will be the conduit through which the so-called tool theory comes into evidence. Then there'll be a recall of another agent to talk about some more digital evidence, and then a cop. And then they could rest as early as next Tuesday. So we've begun as defendants individually to try to map out a plan for putting on the defense. My hunch is the case is maybe 2 weeks from ending, possibly 3. Can't come soon enough for me. I'm homesick and anxious to return home. It's been quite a trip to DC. But one of the more interesting parts of it is having had a chance to go to CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee caucus or annual event last week in Washington. I've never been to events of that sort. I guess that I identify as a conservative if I have to identify as anything along the political spectrum, meaning I think that the progressive agenda has fallen in on itself. And by making diversity an end in and of itself rather than cherishing it as a means to some collective end, we've fractured into a set of warring identities, and we've lost a common conception of right and the trappings of legitimacy, hence Mike and my podcast. But, it was interesting to be there. It was held at a convention center just outside of Washington, DC, about 15-minute drive if you took an Uber out of town. And by all accounts, it was a heavily Trump favored and favoring sort of group, which surprised me. You don't see a lot of, hey, Donald, we love you in the world these days, at least not in the quarters in which I move. But boy, there it was on full display. There were 3 days of proceedings. I missed the first because I had a day job as a trial lawyer. We were off Friday and Saturday, and I went Saturday and Friday. I missed some of the speakers. I didn't get a chance to hear Ted Cruz, but I did get a chance to see Trump, Jair Bolsonaro, his son, Nikki Haley, Lauren Boebert, Vivek Ramaswamy, and I've got a little bit to say about each of them.
Before you get to that, Norm, how was it meeting Ron Coleman? You tweeted out the biggest, what was this? You said, biggest thrill of CPAC today. I got to meet #Ron Coleman. What was that like?
So, I'm wandering around. They had most of the sessions were in one big hall that sat, I'm going to say 8,000 to 9,000 people. And then they had some breakout sessions. It was not very well organized, I have to say that, because they didn't give you a map when you came in, and it was hard to figure out where things were. So I was looking for a session on J6, and I'm struggling. I didn't realize then, but this cold was moving in, and I'm more disoriented than usual. And I look up, and I see this friendly face and this smile, and I'm thinking, that's Ron Coleman. So, went over and we said hello. I gave him a hug, probably gave him my cold. You're welcome, Ron. You're welcome. What goes around? I believe in sharing good and bad. And, we just got a chance to say hello. But the funny thing is, having we've interviewed one another, Ron and I, on our respective podcasts 3 or 4 times now, and it wasn't like I was meeting him for the first time. I felt like I was meeting an old friend, and so it was good to see him.
Well, look, I mean, I think I've been the biggest fan of the two of you as a duo since the first time. I think I actually recorded the first podcast between the two of you when I first came to meet you in Connecticut. Remember, I was there on a trip with Cam up to New York, and I actually was in a buddy's apartment while they were off doing some stuff in the apartment with the studio set up, doing the interview between the two of you. And I remember just sitting there for maybe 5 or 10 minutes after it all ended and we closed everything up and just sort of basked in what I thought was just magic. The two of you had instant chemistry. You were able to go on various, chase down various motifs in American culture, really attack sort of the subject of the history of Western civilization, post-Enlightenment, and grapple with some of the bigger cultural issues. And we've done it again a couple of times. Norm, we actually had Ron on before we began live streaming on Rumble. Well, I guess we still, maybe we live streamed it, but we had Ron Coleman on for a long form after the Yay stuff, and he graciously accepted an invitation to come and discuss because of the severe anti-Semitic I guess criticism that Ye was receiving, and he was nice enough and humble enough to come on and actually discuss that, in full view of everything that was going on. And I found that to be really redeeming because he's one of the few people that would speak honestly about moral obligations of every demographic, right?
Yeah, no, he was, and he is, and I remain a fan of his. I listen to him when I can. I mean, all I can tell you is the reassuring thing about meeting him is, it was seamless. I mean, I'd seen him on video, and there he was in the flesh. We got a chance to chat briefly, and then we went our respective ways. So, shout out to Ron. He didn't run when he saw me coming. That was great. He probably wishes he did now that he's hacking up a lung in Chicago or wherever he is right now. As far as the speakers,
hold on. There is an appearance in our chat right now. Someone by the name of Luke Atkinson.
Whoa! It's the third person of the unholy Atkinson Trinity.
Luke, the apparent or the alleged third sibling, says good morning from Cyprus. Hello, Luke. Welcome from
Cyprus. I mean, what are you doing in Cyprus? Yeah.
Well, we'll see. But, this is a big deal. Everybody say hello to Luke. And also, everybody, like this video, please. Hit the thumbs up and keep that going. We've got a pretty lively chat this morning. All the regulars, Sparkly Reese, BTL, Haley B. Shaw is here. Hello. Gma Parks. She asked if we watched Tucker last night. No. Then we've got In the Cloud as well. He says he's the third in the Trinity, and he's on an artist residency. So this is really cool. Really cool. We'll have to get back to that a little later. Nice to see you being here.
So CPAC, it is a right of center and right of right, I suspect, organization. And it has for many years served as a rallying point for right-wing political types to meet, greet, gather, and consider how to influence the future. Okay, so I'll go, and try to hide my freak flag and some of my unpopular ideas. I listened carefully to all of the speakers, and I came away feeling better about our podcast, feeling like at least we're talking about the right things, but feeling not too good about CPAC. I thought that CPAC, the speakers were a collection of individuals with an attitude in search of a moral and political philosophy, and that they simply lacked one. The usual talking points were raised, hate speech, cancel culture, weaponization of government, the need to avoid unnecessary foreign entanglements, the fear of China. But none of the speakers seem to have a gripping view of what's necessary to address the drift in Western society right now, which in my mind is some conception of human excellence, some set of standards that can be intersubjectively shared, recognized, and used prioritize policy issues in terms of a view of human flourishing. Lauren Boebert testified. Listen to me, I'm a lawyer. She got up and spoke, and she's a transparent. She's a government not transparency hawk, an oversight hawk, and she talked about the importance of oversight, and she was much better than I thought. Nikki Haley spoke. Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, a UN ambassador and presidential candidate. I reached the conclusion after watching her is that she doesn't have the presidential gene. She got up on the podium and she wanted to impress everybody that she was a tough guy. And, okay, so she is. But she didn't really seem to have a vision of what made people tick. Even Vivek Ramaswamy, who is, I'm on his fan list, he spoke and, he surprised the crowd by saying that he would defund or abolish the FBI and seek to return law enforcement to states and localities where it has traditionally reposed. But even that analysis was a mile wide and an inch deep, because the fact is that policing isn't an original function of government at the time of the founding. And so you can't posture as an originalist or as a diehard federalist and decide where to park law enforcement. I mean, there simply are national issues that require a national response. And be as suspicious as you like of the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover's legacy, there is a need for a federal bureau of investigation. And I think Ramaswamy got it wrong. Things got very interesting, however, when Jair Bolsonaro, the former president of Brazil, took the stage. He spoke.
Yeah, your tweet there is that he was spectacular, but I didn't see anything else from you. I assume that was because you were really engaged in what he was talking about.
No, the internet connection was really crappy. And in order to post the little stuff that I posted, I kept having to log on and off. And it was so aggravating, I thought I'd listen rather than try to be a better tweet streamer. But Bolsonaro spoke about populism in Brazil and Brazil's importance to the United States. And what a complete human being he is. The crowd respond. If Bolsonaro could have been endorsed by CPAC for president, he might have even dwarfed Donald Trump. The crowd was entirely warm and receptive to him.
Wow.
And and I learned little things. I don't follow international affairs a lot. But for example, under Bolsonaro and Trump, Iranian warships were not permitted to dock in Brazil. They are now docking in Brazil, and several speakers talked about the threat that posed to the United States, because you don't know what those warships are bringing to the Americas. So Bolsonaro was a good speaker. Donald took the stage, and I suspect that's what you want to hear. He was the last speaker of the event. Oh, but let me go back for a minute. And then I noticed something that really concerned me in CPAC, and I don't know how widespread this is in American culture, but a morbid hostility and preoccupation with China. And it may be that it's warranted, but there was a suggestion from law enforcement speakers in the Southwest that fentanyl coming into the country is produced in China and is targeted against the United States by the Chinese, that they're using cartels to move the product into the United States, and that cartels are doing their banking with China, and that somehow this is these may be facts. Then the conspiratorial gloss is that this is an effort to undermine and destroy the American society, and it's largely succeeding. And some of the CPAC organizers spoke, and by the time the conference was half done, I was ready to hear a declaration of war on China. And
that's your tweet right there at the top. CPAC all but calling for war with China. Wait, let's avoid World War III in Ukraine, but start it with China.
And that I didn't get, because people were very, very critical of intervention on behalf of Ukraine and the prospect of a global war with Russia, while in the same breath calling for one with China. Now, I understand that China is a great power. I understand that we are in a rivalry with China for world influence. I also think that power, there can be only one nation that is the most powerful. And if you're going to play the game at that metaphysical level, then I suppose you have to have an arm wrestling struggle to the death. But I'm not sure that that's what international politics is. I recall the days.
Did Vivek talk about this at all? Did Vivek talk about this at all? And I asked that just to say that, you know, Vivek, at least, and this is the distinction between real life and online. Vivek seems to, just based on your observations, I have to, you know, take for granted that what you're experiencing in terms of low energy and sort of a lack of a, you know, a real soul there to be the truth of the matter. But we do live in sort of a bifurcated reality, right? That is digital and online versus what we experience in real space. But Vivek has spoken pretty explicitly about his perspective on China, which is he intends to decouple America from China in just about every scenario. And his justification is an economic war with China is much preferable to a hot war or a hostile war or an actual war with China. He said that. I don't know if he spoke to that at all at the conference, so I wanted to lob that back to you. But that's at least something that to me would pull back from sort of this hostility that is seeming to leak through the assembly of fentanyl in Mexico with the raw ingredients flowing in from China, right? Because that seems to be the real hot button for most people.
Well, it does, and I don't think he addressed it in any substantial way in his speech. The speakers, other than Trump, were not given much time. I mean, 10, 15, 20 minutes was the norm, and so it was a dizzying array of people, one after another, interspersed with periodic breaks. And so no one was really given an opportunity to let their hair down and develop themes, Ramaswamy among them. The uniform sense that China was in it for its own good, independent of, and in ways that are hostile and antagonistic to American interests, really concerned me, because, you know, economic warfare is a prelude to real warfare. Politics is war by other means, von Clausewitz once said, and I think economics is warfare by another means as well. And so I didn't see a lot of, you know, I didn't see a lot of aspirations to creating global norms. In fact, I saw a little bit of the populist impulse to pull away from global norms. You know, and I understand populism. I understand the America First movement. I understand the desire to take care of yourself before you commit to being taken care of by the world or taking care of the world. But there was if xenophobic is the wrong word, but there was something like a xenophobic aura in the air where people felt imperiled here on the good ship America, and they were inclined to blame China. And I just don't think that playing the blame game in international relations ever solves anything. Another issue that surprised me, and I expect we'll see a lot of it in the presidential campaign, and this is where the spiritual poverty of CPAC was evident, is that the whole transgender thing. You know, Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire got up and talked about the need to eliminate transgenderism. This has been translated by many press into the need to eliminate transgender people, which I think is a different thing. But, you know, his view was there are men and women, and there aren't 72 other flavors of us, and let's stop kidding ourselves by pretending to be something we're not. And I am sympathetic to that view, and it's as close as we came to the rubber meeting the road and developing some sense of human nature as something that if not fixed, is a meaningful thing to talk about. And Knowles approached the need to develop a philosophy of being that includes a vision of human possibilities. But even he couldn't thread the needle. So then we get to Donald Trump. You know, it's the end of the convention. He's speaking at 5:30. And just as a side color note, Saturday when I arrived, you could come and go freely through the conference. But Sunday, everybody had to pass through Secret Service security stations. Even at 9:30 in the morning, Trump wasn't expected until 5:30. And so there was a heightened sense of expectancy. There was a pause between the last speaker and Trump of some minutes. They turned the volume up on the music and they began to play upbeat campaign music, including something from the Village People, which I thought was sort of funny for Donald Trump, you know. And then lo and behold, he hit the stage. And I would say that, you know, there's been a lot of reporting that it was a poorly attended event. I've not gone previously, so I don't know. But the conference room, the main conference room, was filled when he spoke, and there were thousands of people in there. When he got to the stage, many were standing and cheering for him. And he spoke as though he were on the presidential campaign trail, which I suspect and guess he is. And I was curious to see him in the flesh. What sort of, I'd never had, what sort of effect would he have on people? What sort of effect would he have on me? I don't like the man from what I see of him and read about him. He's not someone I'd want to spend time with. He is an unfaithful interlocutor, meaning he can't talk about anything but himself and bend the conversation back to some vision of himself or his purposes for longer than a minute at a time, or so it seems. And I wondered whether the effect of his, having grown 4 years older, would have any impact on how he presented. He hasn't lost a step. I suppose if you're a Trump supporter, that's the good news. He's the same old Donald. But if you're a Trump supporter or a Trump detractor, the bad news is he's still the same old tangential, loopy, reasoning kind of guy who seems to make everything about himself and whose vision of the world doesn't extend any farther than his own reach. And I know that may sound like an unfair criticism, because who among us really, escapes the bounds of solipsism? And maybe none of us do, but we aspire to it. And we try to build community where we can have a meaningful confrontation between ourselves, or not confrontation, but a meaningful exposure, a meaningful exchange of ideas between ourselves and others. You just don't get the sense of that with Trump.
Gima Parks asked a question here. She says, would you agree that international relations were well handled under the Trump presidency?
I would agree that he didn't start a foreign war. And he's one of the few presidents who can say that in his 4-year term. I was not troubled by Brexit. I was not troubled by his aggressive assertion that the United States was going to be one among many global players, and that NATO had to pay its fair share to get its benefit of the bargain of its defense costs and so forth. Trump said at several occasions in his speech, comically, with respect to, I think, I can't remember if it was the president. It was the leader of some group, and Trump was speaking to him and said, we've got a photograph of your house here. This was sort of like a veiled threat. If you don't fly right, you might get a bomb. And he said, the leader asked me why I had pictures of his house, and Trump turned and he paused for a minute. He said, "Ask your wives," plural. So and he was quick to say, Trump was, that sort of the lunatic, the madman in the room factor had an impact on the international leaders, because no one knew precisely what he would do. So I'm not a student of international affairs. I take the fact that he, we ended a dispute with ISIS. Trump takes credit for having destroyed the caliphate. That's good. He takes credit for not getting us involved in a foreign war. That's good.
He walked into North Korea through the demilitarized zone after tweeting at Rocket Man, right?
Yeah,
I mean, all of these are from an optics perspective. I don't think that there's any argument that Trump may be, in my opinion, one of the greatest in terms of international relations presidents of our lifetime, just because of where you started, Norm. Did not start any foreign wars. Pulled us from the Paris Climate Accords. We had the emphasis on the Middle East and the peace there, and we definitely had him telling the EU, right, to pay their taxes.
Well, so here's the thing. This is the appeal of Trump to me. I left. Well, let me finish the wrap up, and then go back to some comments on Trump. But he spoke too long. Everybody had been there for 2 or 3 days, and I was sitting next to a fellow that I met from New York. And Trump spoke for an hour, and this was all by way of warm-ups, warm-up anecdotes and thanking people in the crowd and whatnot. And if president, I'm going to do the following things first. And then he went on and on and on. And now he's been on the stage for about 70 minutes. So I turned to the guy sitting next to me. I said, I can't sit here for 2 hours. And I left. I went down to the hotel restaurant and ate dinner. And he was still talking. So he spoke for about an hour and 45 minutes. He is indefatigable. He's got enough energy for 3 people. So, as I was driving or being driven back to my room, I thought, it's 2024. It's Biden versus Trump. What would I do if I were in the polling place? What would I honestly do if I found myself there? And I'd pull the lever. I'd pull the lever for Trump. I think he's more likely to keep us out of an international conflict than Biden is. And frankly, I like his sort of insouciant FU attitude toward everyone else. And this is what I'm going to do and deal with it. And so, the crowd responded wildly to him. There was a straw poll of CPAC attendees. I think 2,100 people voted. And Trump was their candidate. 62% of those polled would have voted for him for president. 20% would have voted for DeSantis. DeSantis did not attend CPAC. He and some others boycotted it. He attended a fundraiser down in Florida. That may have been a shrewd decision on his part. I know that Nikki Haley was not well received. Tulsi Gabbard did speak, and the buzz on the floor was that Tulsi, the dream ticket from a CPAC perspective, would have been Tulsi Gabbard and Donald Trump. And Tulsi is a classy speaker. She did a good job. So, CPAC 2024, what I would have liked to see is someone hold all of these themes together, pull all of these themes together into a version of human flourishing. This was the poverty of the group was nowhere more apparent than in the call to eliminate transgenderism. You can agree that we've become a politics steeped in frivolity, where every identity has its day, and we're in full-scale revolt against the pot, with each potter saying, "Why makest me thus?" And our politics has become a farce. You can agree with that, but if you're going to turn a corner and you're going to say we've hit some bottom, lift us up from the bottom and take us to a vision of something else. There were no compelling visions offered of the future. There was some fist bumping about making America great again and putting America first. But making us great to do what? First among whom? And first in what world, with what commitment, and what sets of priorities? So I felt like we were on the right hunt here, Mike, with the topics we're raising in law and legitimacy. I think we're doing a better job, frankly, than CPAC did of spotting these issues in the context of a broader intellectual tradition and heritage. And I think we're engaged in a more honest sense of struggle about how to be fully human in a confusing world. CPAC, I'd rate the experience a B or a B plus. I don't know that I'd go to another convention like that. It's time I won't get back, and I caught a cold there, I suspect. So,
yeah, and hopefully you didn't give it to Ron, but if you did. We'll see how that goes. One observation that I have, just being distant here and hearing your observations, and certainly, the chat has several questions. Thinking Man is asking how different the situation in Ukraine would be if Trump were president, acknowledging that we are currently in an international conflict. Does Trump have the ability to end it? These are all sort of, shoulder shrugs. I think that certainly Trump would tell you that he has a clear vision for doing that, and that he could end it very quickly. Trump is also, I think, in recent days went on his own social channels and has extolled the urgency of the situation in Ukraine, and us needing to bring this to an end, lest we be, dragged into a full-scale nuclear war. And so I think tensions are high around that. But with respect to CPAC, it seems like it sounds like it needs a redesign. It sounds like there needs to be a real investment in the technology, how the public can consume these things, and because there are so many issues to grapple with, from domestic issues with law enforcement, domestic issues in culture and education, international issues and considerations of business and military. It seems like there needs to be someone there who is, writing the agenda, investing in ways to make the technology more readily accessible and actually shine a light on these things, rather than just filtering everybody in 20 minutes at a time. I think that that's probably a mistake.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's a technological problem or a problem of vision. You just had the impression that on the CPAC board, and apparently it's an impressively constituted body, there's no one there that is able to capture the room and talk about what's good for the soul. And politics is soulcraft, statecraft is soulcraft. I think George Will once wrote a book by that title. And we've lost the ability or the taste to talk about the soul. And we've lost the ability to talk about what nurtures us. We've lost the ability to transform political discussions into a heartfelt discussion around the dinner table. And instead, we scream at one another and we throw tropes across the room and we engage in meme warfare. And it's just not satisfying. And, I think the 20-minute per speaker format sort of forced speakers to get their best zingers out there quickly. And the result is I felt that I'd been to not even an intellectual fast food restaurant, but just a fast food restaurant, given time to run through the line and grab a few tasty morsels here and there. But I didn't acquire a taste for anything there that I'd need to return to. And that's all the worse for CPAC.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be an element of discovery within that. And, with there's so many better discussions, I think, happening away from CPAC, namely here every morning. But, also, I think I told you over the weekend, I listened to, the Joe Rogan interview with Russell Brand, and Russell Brand had a number of really clear, insightful thoughts. And I acknowledge, the length and diversity of his professional and personal arc. But he did say something that I texted to you, Norm, that said, authority is the price of legitimacy, or vice versa. Legitimacy is the price of authority. And I think that CPAC could do well to recognize that the conversations that need to be addressed are already being had out in the world. They need to find a way to bring those in there rather than trying to create those from scratch with 20-minute sound bites. But that's just me.
Near miss at CPAC this year. We were brought to you today by Dayquil. Are you suffering from the common cold and struggling to stay awake and meet your professional responsibilities in a world gone increasingly haywire? I recommend Dayquil. While struggling through a night of coughing and congestion, NyQuil does the job, and it helps you sleep. And there's nothing like a NyQuil sleep. But in the day when you've got to be alert and on your toes and prepared to meet the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune with alacrity, Dayquil does the trick. That's DAYQI or QUIL.
Limit your objections today, Norm.
All right, I'm still out of it. Thanks for sharing your time with us, folks. I'll try to be better tomorrow, but no promises.
Yeah, you need to try harder. So you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, etc. Please hit the like button in whether you're on Rumble or on YouTube. I want to thank the chat. Luke, again, just want to recognize you. You need to get your brothers in here. They're absent from class today. And appreciate everybody. Matthew Kyle said, it looks like the stream is growing. It's nice to see. We are growing, and we're here every day. We're a reliable source. So, bring us back. Tell your friends, tell your loved ones, tell your, the vendors at your home, your HVAC technicians, your nurse, your nurse assistants, whoever it is. Let them know that law legitimacy is the new sheriff in town, as Norm likes to say. And we're here tomorrow at 7:45 a.m.
And we're going to make America think again.
See you tomorrow, Norm.
Take care.